My name is Lauren Hayes, I'm 32 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas with my husband Daniel Hayes, a quiet man who avoids conflict and believes silence keeps families together, and our 5-year-old daughter Sophie, a bright innocent little girl with soft green eyes and naturally striking red curly hair that made her impossible to ignore wherever she went. But what looked like a normal family on the outside slowly started feeling different on the inside, especially because of Daniel's mother. Patricia Hayes, a woman from Charlotte, North Carolina, who never raised her voice or created open arguments but had a habit of observing everything too closely, like she was quietly collecting information instead of building relationships, and from the very first time I met her, I felt like I was being studied rather than accepted, but I chose patience, I chose silence, I chose respect, believing time would soften things, but instead things only became more uncomfortable after Sophie was born. Because that's when Patricia started focusing on her in a way that didn't feel normal anymore, making small comments at first like, "That hair color is unusual in our family," or "She doesn't really look like a Hayes," and I ignored it in the beginning because I didn't want tension, but over time those comments started repeating at every family gathering, and I started noticing how the room changed when I entered, how conversations paused, how people spoke more carefully around me, and I realized something was building in silence that no one was saying out loud, but I stayed quiet because I work in healthcare and I've learned that patterns always reveal themselves if you wait long enough, and I thought I was just observing harmless behavior until one afternoon everything changed when I received a call from a genetic testing company in California telling me that a DNA test had been submitted for my daughter without my consent, and the name on the request was Patricia Hayes, and in that moment I felt everything go completely still because this was no longer family discomfort or subtle judgment, this was a violation of trust and privacy, so I immediately contacted the lab, stopped the test, and secured all records, but instead of confronting her immediately, I stayed quiet because something told me she wasn't done, and I was right, because I later found out she was preparing a family dinner in Phoenix where she planned to present those DNA results in front of everyone, believing she had proof that would expose me publicly, but what she didn't know was that I had already started digging deeper into the system myself, and while reviewing genetic matches linked to my daughter's profile, I found something unexpected, a name. Ethan Cole, a man living in Seattle, Washington, listed as a close biological relative, and at first it didn't make sense, but when I traced it further, I discovered something buried for decades, because Patricia herself had a secret. Before marrying into this family she had given birth to a child she placed for adoption, a son she never told anyone about, not her husband Robert, not her son Daniel, not anyone, and suddenly everything started connecting in a way I didn't expect, because her obsession with Sophie wasn't really about suspicion, it was about fear that her own past might come back through the very system she tried to use against me, and that's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about a truth she had been running from her entire life. Studio Microphone Part 2. The night of the family dinner in Phoenix felt normal on the surface, but I could feel something underneath it, something heavy that no one was speaking about. The table was perfectly set, conversations were polite, food was served, but the atmosphere carried a pressure I couldn't ignore, and after dinner Patricia stood up holding a sealed manila envelope, her voice calm but controlled as she said, "Daniel, I need you to see this," and when Daniel slowly opened it, the room went completely silent as he read the DNA results, and for a moment I could see Patricia believing she had finally proven what she wanted to believe, and then Daniel looked up and said, "She is my daughter," referring to Sophie, and I could feel the shift in the room, but I didn't react emotionally. I just stood up calmly and said the test was done without parental consent and therefore wasn't valid, and the silence deepened immediately, and then I told Daniel to check the last page, and when he did, everything changed again because there was another name listed there, Ethan Cole, Seattle, and confusion spread instantly across the table. Daniel turned to his mother and asked, "Who is he?" But Patricia didn't answer, not at first, because silence had become the only control she had left, and slowly, in front of everyone, the truth started coming out, that she had a child before marriage, a life she had buried for decades, and in trying to expose me, she had accidentally exposed herself instead, and her husband Robert sat frozen realizing the life he thought he had been living wasn't complete, and Daniel stood between shock and disbelief as everything he believed about his Family started breaking in real time, and Patricia, who had always controlled perception through silence and suspicion, finally lost control completely in one single moment. And later, when I think about that night, I don't feel like I won anything, I just feel clarity, because truth doesn't arrive loudly or dramatically, it arrives quietly when lies can no longer survive. And after that night, everything in that family changed permanently. Boundaries were set, trust had to be rebuilt slowly, and although nothing became perfect, it became honest. And what I learned most from all of this is that the people who try hardest to expose others are often the ones carrying secrets they have never faced themselves. And no matter how deeply something is buried, it always finds its way back to the surface when the time is right.